Have you noticed those layouts that use the right coaches in the right order on the right trains just look right, don't they? Let me explain. I've talked previously about passenger train rules and types of passenger carriages. So how does this all work out with regard to the Yarslow layout? Well, even in the old layout in London, I tried to produce trains that looked right even though they were too short. So the composition of the train and the type of coaches in the train was meant to be right. So coming to the new Yarslow layout, it was a relatively simple job to upgrade the expresses from 6 coaches to 8 and the stopping ordinary passenger trains from 3 coaches to 4. The actual formations of the trains, the data, the types of carriages that I needed to use, were drawn from a number of sources, but always from, where possible, official documents. You can get hold of things that show you these carriage diagrams for various trains, and I would recommend looking out for them. So let's begin by looking at the ordinary passenger trains. That's the stopping passenger trains. On the Yarslow layout, there is a regular service between Beckbridge Central and Northborough of ordinary passenger trains, and these are made up of 4 coaches. That's called a 4 set, and this is typical of what they look like. The first coach in this case is relatively modern. It's a Mark I brake second, and you'll notice that the brake portion of it is on the inside of the train. It's what's called an inside out brake. Fairly common in the northeast. Again, look at photographs of your era and your area just to double check that you've got these things, these little details right. The second coach is another Mark I. This is an all second, so an SK, in the earlier livery of the cream and maroon, commonly known as blood and custard. Then comes another Mark I coach in the same livery, but this one is a composite with first class and second class accommodation. In the transition period of British Railways, late 50s, early 60s, compared with say the 1930s, the balance between second class or third class as it was then and first class changed dramatically, and certainly on ordinary passenger trains like these, the number of first class seats would be very few. At the end of the train, as you would expect, we have another brake coach. This is another second class coach, so this is a BSK. So this is another of the ordinary passenger trains, exactly the same 4 set formation. These are older styles of coaches. These are Thompson coaches, and as it turns out, older models as well. But again, we've got a brake at each end. We've got one composite coach in the middle, which is the maroon vehicle here. So exactly the same formation. And here's exactly the same thing, only different. 4 set, Thompson brake second on the front. Another Thompson coach at all second, SK, followed by exactly the same vehicle, Thompson SK, and on the back, a maroon composite brake. So this time the first class seating is in the rear. Now you will know that there are 2 types of express passenger train at Yarslow. There's the midweek ones that are 5 sets and the weekend ones that are 8 sets. We're going to start by looking at the 5s. Now on express workings, it was not uncommon for the railway companies to provide better coaches than their ordinary passenger trains. So it's no surprise that we find a Mark I on the front of this train, and this provides second class accommodation. So a BSK leads the way. Up behind it we have another second class coach. This is an open coach rather than a corridor coach, so this is an SO. Then comes a rare but not unusual coach, an all first, so first class accommodation right throughout. And this would be a good opportunity to point out that this is what's called a vestibuled coach. Yes, it has a corridor that connects all of the compartments together, but a vestibule allows transit between one coach and another I'll come back to that in a little while. And the reason you want to move between coaches is that there is a buffet car on this train. Now, even though it's 5 coaches, buffet coaches on these sort of services were quite common. And it is also quite common for us modelers to put them in the middle of trains. That isn't always correct, but that's what we do. Note here that this is a very old Gresley coach, and that is entirely prototypical in a train of Mark I coaches. These buffet coaches were expensive to build and expensive to maintain, and so the railway companies got far more life out of them than they did their ordinary service stock. So it would be very common, as I say, to find a much older buffet or restaurant car in a train of modern stock. And at the back of the train, a Thompson BSK, so a brake second. Not uncommon to see Mark I, Gresley and Thompson stock all in the same train. Don't think that all of your trains have to be made up of coaches of all the same era. If you look at 1950s, 1960s general service stock in use on British railways, an awful lot of it owed its origins back to the grouping and even in some cases the pre-grouping days. Now take a look at this down express at 8 coaches travelling between Beckbridge Central and Northborough and see if you can spot something slightly different. Well, I'm sure you got that. This 8-coach train is actually 2 trains bolted together. There is a 5 set, probably a weekday set, on the front of it, and on the back of it there is a 3 set, probably from a different diagram, added on to make up to 8 coaches. So leading the way here we've got a brake composite, then a pair of Gresley all thirds. That's followed by a Mark I SK. Then we've got a Thompson brake, making up the end of the first portion. The second portion starts with a brake composite, followed by an all second and a brake second. And here's another variation, very common on the southern system but not unusual elsewhere, and that is to have the first coach carrying parcels or small packages. Another 8-coach train, nothing unusual you would think, but actually this is only a 7 set, and on the front there is a strengthener. Don't get these on modern systems, but this is a coach that has been added onto the train because somebody somewhere felt that we needed more accommodation. Maybe the train was looking busy at its point of origin. So this composite has been added to the front of the train between the engine and the first brake. Now a couple of trains you've seen before. This is the Withney train, comes up the Withney branch and turns around at Yarslow, made up of 2 non-corridor, non-vestibule coaches. Incidentally, the coastal service, that's the one that runs between Trinity Square and Northborough via Yarslow, uses non-vestibule corridor coaches. So these coaches have 2 parts to them, first class and second class accommodation. There's a corridor for each part of the train so they could reach the central positioned lavatories, but the corridors don't go into the next coach, so there's no vestibule in order to move on to the coach adjacent. So they are non-vestibuled corridor coaches. Interesting. And please don't get drawn into this idea that a suburban train is anything different. It's an ordinary passenger train that works in a suburban area. These running between Trinity Square and Midworth are still brake second composite brake formations. Now a few oddities for you just to help set scenes. This Stanier brake second is on the back of the horsebox train and tries to make the point that the train has travelled from a London Midland region by being a London Midland coach. Whereas these are nothing more than just old trying Hornby Clistori coaches repainted into the Hyde Marsh Boys' School set and pretending to be Howden coaches, which of course they're not. But it's worth pointing out that these venerable old vehicles, if you put new wheels in them, give them a paint job and fit full interiors as this one has, they make pretty decent models. And if you're looking for something in the carriage diagrams that you can't buy ready to run, then don't be afraid to try a coach kit. The old Ian Kirk kits in 00 are around again for us northeastern modellers, and very nice they are too. They're easy to put together and they don't make bad little results. And last but not least, let's not forget that in this era some of the branch services and some of the shorter services were served by DMUs, so no surprise to find the High Marsh branch and that short shuttle train between Trinity Square and Retford served by 2-car DMU units.